Thank you. So the topic that the teams received 7 days in advance is national regulation of critical mineral supply chains must remain consistent with international obligations concerning environmental protection and indigenous rights. Before we allocate positions, as always, we will get to know the members a bit better. Starting with the University of Bologna in Italy, could we hear from Mr. Alessandro Mash, please?
Yes, good morning, everyone. My name is Alessandro, and I'm originally from South Africa, but I've been in Bologna for 2 years pursuing a Master of Legal Studies.
Thank you so much. From the University of Melbourne, Miss Cindy Nguyen, please.
Good morning and good evening. I'm Cindy and I am a law student at the University of Melbourne.
Thank you. From the University of Bologna, Miss Maria Soldatelli.
Good morning, everyone. I'm Maria Vittoria Solatelli. I'm originally from Brazil, or I'm also a lawyer, and I'm also an associate editor of the Bologna Law Review. And I'm currently in my second year of my master's as my colleague. And I wish everyone a very pleasant match today.
Thank you for sharing. From the University of Melbourne, Mr. Joseph Calera, please.
Good evening, everyone. My name's Joseph. I am a third year Juris Doctor student at the University of Melbourne.
Thank you. Now for the final member from the University of Bologna, Ms. Ceren Özkan, please.
Hello, everyone. I'm Ceren Özcan. I'm from Turkey. I'm currently pursuing my second year of master's in legal studies in University of Bologna. I wish a great match to all. Thank you so much.
Thank you. And now for the final member from the University of Melbourne team, could we hear from Mr. Jay Foster, please?
Good morning and good evening, everyone. I'm Jay Foster, and I'm also doing my third year at the Juris Doctor in Melbourne. Thank you.
Awesome. Thank you so much. We would also like to give a special shout out to the coaches. So from the University of Bologna, they are supported by coaches Jose Molinelli, Guleykan Yildiz, and Mahmoud Peramov. And from the University of Melbourne team, Mr. Wayne Jokic. With that, could we please allocate positions? If we could please share the screen.
Thank you. If I can just get a confirmation that it's visible.
Yes, we can see you.
Thank you. 4 possibilities, 2 for each team. Great. And for today's debate, it is the team of University of Bologna that will defend the motion, thus arguing in favor that national regulation of critical mineral supply chains must remain consistent with international obligations concerning environmental protection and indigenous rights. And it will be the University of Melbourne's team that will argue against this motion. You have now 5 minutes to finalize your preparations.
Okay, that concludes the preparation stage. Before we start the official match, just two quick reminders. First, regarding timekeeping, I will be the timekeeper, so please ensure that you can see my screen. As always, the yellow card means that you have 30 seconds left, and the red card means that time is up. You may comfortably finish your sentence, but it is not recommended that you start another. And the second matter is just giving a quick shout out to the judges who will be reviewing this match and giving them a special thanks. With that, we will start off with the team in favor with their opening statements, which is the University of Bologna. 4 minutes whenever you're ready.
Thank you. Honorable judges, we stand before you to defend the motion. Critical minerals are crucial in the global race for the energy transition, and states have a legitimate interest in regulating them to secure stable and resilient supply chains. We do not dispute this, but mineral exploitation, however legitimate, directly affects environmental protections and indigenous rights. And once a state accepts international obligations protecting those interests, which is itself an exercise of sovereignty as held by the PCIJ, the predecessor to the ICJ in the SS Wimbledon case, it follows that national regulations must remain consistent with them. Our position rests on 3 points. First, sovereignty does not allow states to disregard the international obligations they have assumed. Second, permanent sovereignty over natural resources must be exercised consistently with the no harm duty. And third, where mineral exploitation affects indigenous peoples, they must be protected as distinct rights holders. So first, we are not proposing that every state must comply with every environmental treaty or every indigenous rights instruments. We have no intention to challenge states' sovereign authority. But once a state has consented to be bound by an international obligation, then the principle of good faith mandates compliance as per Article 26 of the Vienna Convention on the Law of the Treaties. And this is reinforced by Article 27 of the VCLT. A party may not invoke internal law as justification for failure to perform an international treaty, which is a rule that the ICJ in the Belgium versus Senegal case has expressly said to reflect customary law, binding as such even non-parties to the VCLT. Second, we are not questioning state sovereign authority to regulate and exploit our natural resources. This is a right recognized in Article 3 of the Convention on Biological Diversity and reflected in Principle 2 of the Rio Declaration. But both provisions also make clear that this right must be exercised in accordance with the UN Charter and international law, and is subject to the responsibility not to cause environmental damage beyond national jurisdiction. And beyond treaty provisions, this no harm rule is also reflected in customary law. It was recognized in the Trills Melter arbitration, then reaffirmed by the ICJ in the Nuclear Weapons Advisory Opinion. And the ICJ confirmed recently in its 2025 Climate Advisory Opinion that this duty is not limited to classic transboundary pollution, but also applies to global environmental concerns such as climate change, which is directly affected by mining. Finally, where mineral exploitation affects indigenous peoples, they must be protected as distinct rights holders because it often affects them directly, their lands, their waters, sacred sites, and cultural survival. Under Article 27 of the International Covenant on Civil and Political Rights, as interpreted by the UN Human Rights Committee in the Palma Palma versus Peru case, measures that substantially interfere with indigenous peoples' traditional way of life may violate their right to enjoy their culture, which is why the UN Declaration on the Rights of Indigenous Peoples sets out that states must obtain free, prior, and informed consent before approving projects affecting their lands, territories, or resources as per Articles 10, 19, 29.2, and 32.2. To conclude, while states do have a legitimate interest in regulating critical minerals, they cannot disregard their international obligations on environmental protections and indigenous rights. If sovereignty is the very reason states may regulate on their natural resources, then why should it be ignored when it comes to the obligations that they have sovereignly accepted? For these reasons, the motion must stand. Thank you.
Thank you. Now for the opening statement for the team against the motion, University of Melbourne. Your 4 minutes whenever you're ready.
Hello, is everyone able to hear me and see me?
Yes.
Okay, perfect. Then I will begin in 3, 2, 1. Let me start by drawing a line that I want to hold throughout this debate. There's an easy version of this motion and a hard version. I want to make sure that we are debating the hard one. The easy version is, should states comply with international law? That is a truism. Nobody in this room disputes it, and the opposition will not dispute it today, despite the affirmative saying so. If the affirmative spends 7 minutes telling us that international law matters, that environmental obligations are serious, and that Indigenous rights are real, we will agree with all of it, because that's not the debate. The hard version, and what is worth arguing today, is what happens in the cases of direct, high-stakes conflicts of rights, where the lithium is under a cave. Having said that, I urge us to keep these two ideas in mind throughout this debate: development and displacement. First, the affirmative model locks poorer states out of the very industrialization pathway that made rich states wealthy. And second, their model does not stop harm, but exports it into weaker states with worse labor conditions and weaker enforcement. Turning to our first point about development, we need to be honest about the scale of what is at stake here. This is a trade-off between localized harms on one hand and the industrialization and uplift of millions, if not billions, of lives on the other. When Britain industrialized, life expectancy rose and poverty collapsed. When China industrialized, over 800 million people were lifted out of extreme poverty. Critical minerals are this generation's equivalent. Even international law recognizes this tension. The UN Sustainability Development Goals expressly balances environmental protection against development and poverty reduction. And the ICJ in the North Sea Continental Shelf case also recognized states' sovereign rights to exploit natural resources for national development. When we distill the affirmative framework down to a line, it's really about preserving every tree while ignoring the starving, emaciated child standing beneath it. How is that fair? Now, the affirmative says they support sustainable development, but in the marginal cases, the one this debate is actually about today, those constraints are not neutral. They determine whether extraction happens at all. And so when they say you can have both, what they really mean is you can develop, but only under the standards that the richest countries themselves ignored while getting rich, climbing the ladder up to prosperity, then telling developing states to jump off it. Turning to our second point about displacement, a binding consistency requirement does not produce harm reduction, but produces harm migration. This is because capital will move to the lowest cost jurisdiction. If you ban factories in one country while demand persists, the factories don't disappear, but they move somewhere else with weaker regulation and weaker enforcement. Now, this displacement point is one we can talk about in theory for a long time today, but let me just tell you about where this has happened in the world. The Australian company Lynas mines rare earths in Vietnam, not Australia, despite Australia having very abundant deposits. And China extracts cobalt from the DRC. I wonder why this is the case. Even the Trail Smelter arbitration case recognized that environmental harm does not vanish when one state regulates, but shifts across borders into weaker jurisdictions. The affirmative model works in a utopian, dreamy world, but we are much more realistic in acknowledging that it fails in practice. This debate was never about whether environmental and Indigenous rights matter, because we agree that they do. The question today, however, is what happens when they collide with development, when they collide with electrification, and when they collide with the economic survival of millions, if not billions, of lives. And our case today has shown two key things. First, their model denies billions a better life. And second, it exports harm rather than preventing it. The affirmative offers the world a beautiful regime in the abstract. However, in practice, it protects every right except the right of the poor countries to become rich ones, and protects every value except the values it claims to defend. We urge you to oppose. Thank you.
Thank you so much. We will now start off with the first round of rebuttal with the team in favor of the motion. University of Bologna, 2 minutes whenever you're ready.
Thank you, honorable judges and esteemed opposition. So my esteemed colleague from the opposition has just said that, of course, states should align with international law. This is a truism. No one's arguing that. Well, it might be a truism, but it's not a reality, unfortunately. Let's look at the reality. So the International Energy Agency says that by 2040, demand for critical minerals is expected to rise sixfold. And what does this do? This creates economic pressure on states to compete. And when states compete in this way, they want to attract more investment, they want to extract more, and the law becomes a variable. Let's see what happens when states do align their law with international regulation. What we saw in the Pulp Mills versus Uruguay case, that the court categorically held that economic interests cannot supersede protection of the environment. Let's look to indigenous rights. We saw in the case of AUS Tigni community versus Nicaragua, where the court said that pursuing an economic interest cannot avoid taking into account the rights of indigenous peoples in those areas. And then the opposition mentioned the DRC, and they're absolutely right to. Let's look at the current situation in the DRC, emaciated youths, etc. We can see that when alignment is absent, the cobalt supply chain there has decimated the environment, displaced local communities, and of course, it is already a target for corporate arbitrage. That already exists. Not when states align with international law, but precisely when they don't, because the Democratic Republic of Congo is by no means aligning their law over there. And so the question to the opposition really is, how can they claim that gaps can be exploited under international law when they're already being exploited under the current regime where national jurisdictions are not aligned? Thank you.
Thank you. We will now hear the first round of rebuttal for the team against the motion, University of Melbourne. You have 2 minutes.
Hi, just checking I'm audible.
Yes, you are.
Yep, perfect, thank you. Let's begin with reframing this debate. This is not a debate about when nations may easily decide to follow international environmental obligations and uplift its people out of poverty. This is a debate about when rights conflict. Crucially, Gabčíková-Nagymaros also confirmed that environmental obligations must be weighed against developmental necessity and state interests. It must not automatically override them. This is the question in this debate. Our friends of the affirmative side asked us what happens in a situation in which states now can't compete, or a world in which everyone is held to international standards. What happens is those countries that are currently in situations of dire poverty and of high rates of absolute poverty are no longer able to compete and actually acquire mining jobs which uplift its citizens. What we lose under our side is the right for a state to make positive decisions that allows impoverished citizens in rural, developing areas who depend on the abundant mining of these minerals to receive the economic value that it brings out. They frame their arguments in irreversibility, but we ask you to consider how reversible it is for a child to grow up malnourished and without access to adequate shelter. What we're arguing for are the very people charged with looking after their own nations to be the ones to decide where these rights should be weighed and whether or not they should choose development over environmental standards. We'd also note a second point, being that they've claimed that being consistent with obligations is a neutral standard, one that all these countries have opted into. But we would note that consistency is determined by whoever interprets the obligations, and tribunals have read these expansively. Free and informed consent has been interpreted to include benefit sharing, independent measures, and indefinite delay rights. These are significant burdens which pose a significant threat to these individuals. Happy to oppose.
Thank you. Now for the second round of rebuttal, starting, of course, with the team in favor, University of Bologna. You have 2 minutes.
Thank you. Honorable judges and esteemed opposition, we absolutely do not think that aligning national law with international regulation is a neutral position. It's an essential position. Why? Let's look at the nature of these critical mineral supply chains. All right, they're spread across multiple jurisdictions. This we know. They're extracted in one, they're processed in another, and they're used in a third. So we have here an international problem. All right. Now, without consistency, these obligations become meaningless, because corporations can exploit those gaps. And in fact, they are already. I ask the honorable opposition, when he says, we want to empower economically the people of a certain state, which companies operate in these jurisdictions? National companies or foreign companies? Who exactly are we empowering over here? Now, we saw that international law has the power to give meaning to national law once it's aligned, in the case of Ugenda Foundation versus the Netherlands, in which the court relied on international law in order to impose domestic enforcement of environmental protection in their own state. And the same could apply to supply chains. If we look to the OECD due diligence guidance for responsible mineral supply chains, we see that it has concretely changed corporate behavior in states which comply. and not in states which don't. And so, once again, I would like to firmly agree with the opposition that we want to empower people, all right? But we most certainly do not empower people. In fact, we make weaker states weaker when we make it the case that they provide gaps and blueprints and frameworks for corporate arbitrage. This is an international problem. It only works due to the nature of the supply chain when there is international coherence. And so I ask the opposition, how do they propose to solve an international problem with national solutions, purely national solutions? Thank you.
We will now hear the final rebuttal from the team against the motion, University of Melbourne. You have 2 minutes.
Laurie, is everyone able to hear me and see me still?
Yes. Yep.
Perfect. Then I'll begin in 3, 2, 1. Honourable judges, the affirmative has cited one case. I want to acknowledge it, and then I want to put it in proportion. They can give you one case, but we can give you 100 more that point the other way. The North Sea Continental Shelf case, for example, recognises sovereign rights over natural resources. The Nagamaras judgment also requires environmental obligations to be balanced against developmental necessity. And the ICSID tribunals consistently recognise that states cannot be held to absolute environmental standards without regard to economic context. So there, we have 3 cases. Turning to our second point, the deeper problem here that I've identified is that the affirmative treats rights as absolute, as though environmental and Indigenous rights automatically override every competing interest every time. But that is simply a fundamental misunderstanding of how rights work. Even in liberal democracies, courts balance free speech against safety. Courts balance property against public infrastructure. Courts balance privacy against national security. The ICJ in the Nagamaras case, for example, explicitly recognized the need to balance these environmental obligations against state necessity. The affirmative wants one category of rights to function as an absolute, a standard which most democracies across the world do not apply within their own borders. So therefore, we argue that it does not function in practice, and it only functions in a utopian, unrealistic world. Thank you. Proud to oppose.
Thank you. That concludes the rebuttal stage. We will now move on to concluding statements, starting with the team in favor. University of Bologna, you have your final 2 minutes.
Thank you. Honorable judges and esteemed colleagues, in today's debate, we have seen 2 different visions of the future. The opposition offers a world where flexibility is just a convenient mask for a race to the bottom, where the urgency of the climate is used as a shield for the same old exploitation. On the other hand, what we offer is a green transition that is not just a change in fuel, but a change in our values. Our case is built on a simple reality. Critical minerals belong to a global supply chain. When we allow states to ignore international duties under the guise of sovereignty, we create safe havens for environmental damage. As the ICJ held in Paltman's economic development never gives the state the right to lower its environmental standards. Consistency is the only thing that stops companies from simply moving to where the regulation is weakest. The opposition claims international law is too vague, but as the Uganda case proves, these obligations are the very tools that give domestic courts the power to hold governments accountable. Consistency doesn't change, just enforce a rule, it recognizes a fundamental truth. You cannot protect an ecosystem without protecting the indigenous people who sustain it. If sovereignty is the reason states have the power to regulate, it cannot be the excuse they use to ignore the obligations they freely accept. We are told we must choose between production and protection. We reject that choice. A supply chain built on the violation of indigenous rights is not a fast supply chain. It is a fragile one, bound to fail under legal conflict and social unrest. We don't just need a transition of technology, we need a transition of integrity. We cannot power the clean energy of tomorrow with the dirty practices of yesterday. For a global baseline that no state can bypass, the motion must stand. Thank you so much.
Thank you. And now for the concluding statement for the team against the motion, University of Melbourne, your final 2 minutes.
Thank you. Can you please confirm that you can see and hear me well?
Yes.
Thank you. Now, whilst this motion is well-meaning, The affirmative's failure is clear. They believe that states cannot regulate themselves to also look to protect the environment and Indigenous peoples, whilst also considering other aspects that states must consider for the well-being of their citizens, making states tethered to the onerous and economically detrimental international obligations gridlock their ability to use critical minerals to support human development. Let me give you a reminder of the opposition's case, and there are three things which point to why national sovereignty must take the lead in regulating critical mineral supply chains. First, these international requirements lock developing nations into cycles of stagnation and deny them the industrial tools necessary for societal uplift. National development is not a mere want. Uplift is meaningful. What it means is that more than 800 million people can come out of extreme poverty, which is exactly what happened in China when they utilized critical minerals to industrialize. Secondly, international obligations are not some magic wand that solves issues automatically. What they instead do is they incentivize companies to move their operations and exploit states. And the affirmative have correctly pointed out there is a change in corporate behavior, but this is not the behavior that we want to incentivize. Last, we point to the fact that this motion unfairly weighs the importance of environmental and Indigenous rights as opposed to other aspects that states must consider when they determine policy. By opposing this motion, we are not ignoring rights or international duties. We are contextualizing, balancing them, and being thoughtful about the way a state governs and serves its people. Thank you.
Thank you so much to both teams. We have now concluded the match. You are no longer assessed from this point onwards, so you can feel free to relax. Okay, so as always, we will start off with some reflections before going over our networking questions. So with reflections, again, just going over how you found the match and the topic itself. So maybe we can start off with the University of Melbourne. Could we hear from Mr. J. Foster, please?
Yeah, I thought overall it was, first of all, an excellent match, guys. I really enjoyed this. I think you guys raised some interesting points and some cases that we had seen as we'd gone over the research as well. I think, yeah, fundamentally, I just enjoyed this debate as a whole. I think for us as like members of the JD or whatever, we don't often get a chance to kind of really have these deep dives into discussions about international law as much as we'd perhaps like, and this was a great opportunity to do that. I guess my teammates can elaborate more.
Thank you so much. From the University of Bologna, Ms. Ceren Oskan, how did you find the match?
First of all, thank you all the members of both teams. It was a great match. It was visible that both teams prepared well done. It was an amazing debate from our side. I'm sure my teammates will also agree with me. We felt like we're actually debating here, so it was an interesting and great match. Thank you for the pleasure.
Thank you. Mr. Joseph Calera, how did you find the match?
I found the match to be very interesting, very relevant to Australia, which has a large mining industry, and our neighbours as well are quite involved in the critical mineral supply chain and resource extraction. So there was a lot that we could draw upon. I previously did a clinic subject where we dealt with how we can make societies more resilient in the face of climate change, and I found a lot of that research was quite relevant. So a lot of the cases that the affirmative brought out and a lot of the cases that we had delved into were really relevant to some of the things that we even talk about today in that clinic about improving climate resilience. So I thought this was a really good circle around to what problems we were trying to solve in that clinic, and I'm grateful for that opportunity.
Thank you so much for sharing that. From the University of Bologna, could we hear from Miss Maria Soldatelli, please?
Well, thank you so much. I actually truly appreciated the topic. And to be honest, as a Brazilian person, critical mineral extraction right now is quite a relevant topic. So this is a quite dear issue for myself. And also incredibly complex. I feel like all of us in the team, and I'm sure the opposing team as well, found ourselves like a little bit even lost sometimes with how many branches there were and how many different sides we could try to argue. And honestly, I'm incredibly pleased with the match today. I feel like both sides were able to defend their points quite well, and we actually felt like we had an engaging debate, to be honest. So yeah, I would say this.
That's really great to hear. And now, last but not least, from the University of Melbourne, could we hear from Miss Cindy Nguyen, please?
Hello. Yeah, I think I just would like to reiterate what's been mentioned already, which is that I found today to be a really insightful and great debate. In terms of how I found the motion, I actually was on the Melbourne University Law Review for a while, and we looked at a lot of cases like this, and I think it was really interesting comparing the legislation across jurisdictions and looking particularly into cases where there was a balance. I think I mentioned, rights are not absolute, and so I really enjoyed reading about that because it's always fascinating to read interesting opinions that you may or may not agree with. So yeah, that was my opinion. I found it really insightful, really edifying as always.
Awesome. Thank you so much for that. And now could we hear from Mr. Alessandro Mash, please?
Yes, thank you. First of all, thank you to the opposition for the very engaging debate. As far as the topic was concerned, it was, usually with these topics, you go down a wormhole and a few doors open. Over here, every door opened. There were so many doors. And it was also really interesting to obviously debate a team from Australia, given the topic, as well as being in a team where my own country of South Africa has a lot of history with minerals, my colleague Maria as well, and even Turkey, as we found out from our colleague Kerem. So the topic was very engaging and there were many ways to go about it. The debate itself, I think we prepared. Well, I can speak for myself. I prepared a lot. I was quite sure that this was going to be a tough debate, and my worries were most certainly confirmed, in the sense that this team really did respond to everything we said. We tried our best to respond to everything they said, and I think that's what a debate should be.
Awesome. Thank you so much. We will now hear some reflections from the coaches, if they are comfortable. So maybe starting with Mr. Jose from the University of Bologna, if you have a few words.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes,
There
we
we go.
can.
Yes, so truly an amazing match by both sides. My deepest congratulations to both our team and the opposing team. You really did an amazing accumulation of sources, references, research. And I really appreciate from this match the strong direct dialogue between both narratives. It wasn't just merely a preparation from one side to the other. It was you pretty much both had a strong dialogue and connection with the other team's opposing views. So I truly congratulate both of you, and I hope that the best results for both, and to continue seeing your progress in this competition and in the field of law in general.
Thank you so much. Would any of the other coaches like to share? Mr. Wayne Jokic?
Thank you very much. Hello, everyone. I'd like to start with a side point, which is to say that the University of Melbourne was founded in 1853. The University of Bologna was founded near enough 1,000 years ago. But we are still universities where we want to have intellectual debate. And I think one thing that's come through in all the discussions here is that tonight, this morning, we had a real debate. The teams engaged with one another. They were dealing with difficult ideas, having done research. That's exactly what a university should be doing. It's exactly what lawyers and people interested in international law should be doing. And it was so much fun to watch this. So I want to say to everybody who debated, to the coaches, to the judges, thank you very much for making this possible. It's so much fun.
Awesome. Thank you all so much for your kind words and reflections. And again, great job to both teams. The debate was indeed very intense, so it was really lovely to see. I will now hand over to Ms. Urbanova, who will go over the networking questions and also the summary of placements for both universities. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ms. Lal, and really congratulations to the two teams. It's really been an engaging debate. I believe the judges for this match will have their work ahead of them, and really thank you for already. Perhaps some of you are already watching now live, but really well done to the teams for the progression. It's been a pleasure to watch your debates from the beginning up until now. As for the networking questions, first one, you have already hinted, some of you, over the questions in the past and also in the networking part. The first question would be, what kind of legal professional do you hope to become in the coming years? And perhaps what are the experiences shaping your ambition for that progress? And first, for the University of Bologna, of course, you can choose in order which you would answer. So first, your team.
I think I can start. We can do it as in order. Well, I would love to continue in the field of international public law, which is a passion of mine. I do also really enjoy the area of business and human rights, which is basically the application of international treaties to companies, right, which are private agents, but still, that's quite interesting. As for future job opportunity, hopefully, I would love to work as a legal consultant. Hopefully, in the let's say Ministry of Foreign Affairs or something like that. And well, maybe even dreaming of a diplomatic career one of these days. Let's see. So yeah, as for wishes, and that'd be this.
Can I go? So it's a very difficult question. I think I've been fortunate enough to have some very interesting lectures and talks in some of the courses I've been doing this semester, talking about exactly how, well, the world is changing drastically and dramatically, and thus the law as well. And so I won't say a particular field I'd like to go into. It would definitely be consulting, but I want to be a lawyer who is also knowledgeable about all these, I think, very different changes going on. So not so much a field of law, but a lawyer who's able to stay on top of exactly what it means to work and to practice any profession in this decade and the next few. Yeah.
Yeah, from my side, changes in the area of law is affecting me as well. I'm up, by the way, I forgot to mention, but I'm a lawyer in Turkey. I practiced there for 2 years and then I started my master's. And what I was doing there was legal consultancy, basically. And I was interested in personal data protection law. And by the lectures I received from University of Bologna, my interest growth, and now I want to be an international legal consultant, specified in data governance, data protection in general. I'm following these changes, I can say.
Very inspiring. Thank you all for sharing. And now the same question to the team of University of Melbourne.
I think I'll start. Kind of echoing what's already been mentioned by the other team. I do currently work in civil law and human rights, so that's something that I definitely would like to continue going into the future. I've also done a little bit of consulting there, so I think in the future I'd like to do something that merges both of those. In particular, looking at major public policy decisions or big public policy questions that involve like balancing economic rights, balancing other interests, and anything that looks particularly at legislation is something I think it sounds a bit tedious in the abstract, but I do really enjoy it, reading different pieces and seeing how it works together.
I'll go. That's okay. I think Alessandro put it best, where I think the world is changing very, very fast. And I think the industries of today are probably not going to be the same industries of tomorrow. And so I think tactility is really important as law students, as practicing lawyers in the future. That being said, I do have preferences. So I really do like the idea of working somewhere with sustainability. And I think the more that we go into this kind of technological arms race, I think the more important it is for there to be defendant work against, companies or states trying to overdevelop in certain areas. So um, I think coming from my work experience, doing a lot of work for legal aid and doing a lot of work in insurance, I think I have a natural want to kind of root for the underdog. So that's kind of where I'm leaning towards.
Yeah, and I guess I would say for me, the probably the best piece of advice I got coming into law school now almost 3 years ago was keep an open mind, especially as you go through different subjects. You're going to have your interests change and kind of where you see yourself going change. I think that's still the case now. I think there's still uncertainty in terms of what practice area of law. I think I've always traditionally thought of myself leaning towards a litigation space. I had a bit of an economics background and finance background, so the commercial litigation space. But it's competitions like these where you're all of a sudden exploring, international treaties, and you're looking at international instruments, and all of a sudden you go, oh, well, actually, maybe public interest law is something that is really interesting to me. I think personally, I still lean towards litigation or back end stuff, just because I find the adversarial aspect of law engaging, and I think it keeps it really exciting and means that every single day is kind of different, essentially. But obviously, yeah, keeping an open mind, that's the main thing for me.
Once again, quite insightful. Really, thank you for sharing. Of course, before passing to the next question, which is in regards to your ideal, perhaps, opportunity to travel to study abroad or have a training or professional experience abroad and what inspired it, I would just like to highlight your participations so far. Looking also with the history of your participations, of course, for both teams, it is the 5th participation in the tournament. So you have been quite on track in regards to your progression, and for both teams, it's the second time your university is represented in quarterfinals. So well done for taking the baton from your predecessors and passing on to this year's edition. Of course, University of Bologna, we have known since the opening and actually from the closing ceremony of last year, you are the team that is passing after the current holding champion of the tournament. For the University of Melbourne, at this point, you are at the 18th spot on the World League of Debate, and you are 3rd on the Oceania zone of the WODL. For the University of Melbourne so far, you have 13 matches that have been won in the history of the tournament. And for the team of Bologna, for your university, it has been 17 matches so far won in the competition. Really well done. And of course, we see the passing on of the knowledge, be that from your mentor, which have been consistent from the very beginning, or from engaging from the past participants as mentorships as we go on. So it's been honestly an honor to see the progression of the teams, of course, with the new coming teams that are in the first participation as well. So really well done. I think you can be quite proud of yourselves for representing and for holding on and continuing the tradition. And for the next steps, the question, as it was already a bit of sneak peek before, if you had the opportunity to study or train abroad for the next semester, perhaps, or one semester in the past, where would you go, and what would you hope to gain from the experience? And this time first for the University of Melbourne.
It's an interesting question. I'm originally from the Philippines, and I think a goal of mine is to go back to the Philippines and potentially look at working and maybe even studying there abroad. I think I grew up in Australia, so there's a lot of the Philippines I still want to kind of explore, and being a first generation immigrant in Australia, you do miss out on a lot of cultural aspects that I guess it's difficult to kind of replicate in Australia. So I think particularly to see my family and to be a little bit more knowledgeable about where I've come from, I think the Philippines would be a great place to start.
Um, I think the obvious answer here is Bologna. If you guys will have me, I would love to go down and see the beautiful things you have in Italy. But as an aside to that, I also would like to go to London. I think there are a lot of wonderful institutions as well that are like close to Parliament and international arbitration centres in London, which I would really, really enjoy being able to witness and be there in person.
Yeah, I guess I would say I'm very similar, actually. If not the University of Bologna, it would probably be the UK or Canada or the US. I think, given the common law shared background that those countries have with Australia, it just means that I think a lot of the legal insight that we have here and the rules are relatively transferable. So I think in that way, those are probably the ones that I think would be most likely. But that being said, yeah, would not be opposed to some time in Italy.
Thank you, everyone. And now to University of Bologna's team.
Well, I think this is going to be quite a predictable answer, but the University of Bologna as a foreigner. But I can tell you why. Mostly due to the university's history, which is incredible. Like when we think that, Dante Alighieri also studied in Bologna almost 700 years ago or something like that, and we're still here. So that's extremely interesting. Also from a educational aspect, of course, Bologna is an amazing university. And personally also, I think it's interesting to be in Italy as, um, roots wise, I would say, because my family also comes from Italy, though we're like fourth generation immigrants, so it's not that deep, I guess. But so it's quite nice to be here. So yeah, Bologna. But I would be open to maybe go to the UK one of these days as well. I think it's quite an interesting country. Spain too, if I can get to improve my Spanish, maybe. But yeah, that would be my answer.
So objectively speaking, of course, objectively, Australia would be very beautiful. It looks like a beautiful country. Everyone says it's beautiful. But I won't speak objectively because the South African in me is recalling rivalries in other fields besides debating today, various sports. And so I have to not say that, unfortunately. But I think that the UK would be interesting because in South Africa, we use a lot of Roman Dutch law. And so coming to Bologna was super cool because you'll find one day when you come that, the Italians are very classical in the treatment of the law, corpus juris civilis, all of these things. And then on the other hand, we have the very pragmatic common law aspect going on. And so it could be quite interesting to first start with that intense civil law kind of background and then go straight to where the common law actually came from. That could be very interesting too. And then Australia.
Well, I would love to say Australia, but unfortunately, I'm scared of the animal population you guys have there. So it's not an option for me, unfortunately. I want to be very honest, but also kind. It's a very interesting country, but I'm scared. On the other hand, I like to study in Italy because it's an amazing country. There is a lot of joy, a lot of drinking, a lot of eating, great food, and I'm Turkish, guys, so we have great food too. So if I'm saying great food, you can believe me. On the other hand, uh, Italy and the rest of the Europe, it's all the same law system with Turkey. So I would love to experience the common law, one of the common law countries as well, but under the condition of normalized animal habitat.
I see some overlap in regards to possible exchanges, at least perhaps in coursework. So perhaps that could be a good talking point to keep in mind going forward. Of course, we will do our best to help you guys stay connected. We might have some news incoming soon about the alumni network, so that might be one of the possibilities you can keep in contact. Of course, we really do encourage you to stay in contact also through LinkedIn, and if you would like to be connected by emails, do let us know. For the results, as soon as we validate the scores, we'll be sharing them with you, and you will be then knowing who progresses to the semifinals. And of course, all of you are most welcome to join for the final week in The Hague, which will be happening between 8th and 12th of June, where we usually also have accompanying events in the city with the international organizations that are active in the city. And on that note, once again, congratulations for your quarterfinals debate. And I'll be passing to Professor Lohanch to wrap us off.
Thank you very much.
Bye.
Bye.
Thank you very much.